My name is Isabell Teffan Bennet. I was named after my great-grandma, whose name was Isabell, and my mom, whose name is Teffan. Our family have been the Bennets forever. Bennet means blessed, but when I was little, I thought our family was cursed. We were in a way because we were serfs and have been forever. A serf is someone who has no rights and no respect. They are at the bottom of the social period in the Middle Ages. There has not been a single lucky lord or lady in our family tree since as far back as I have ever traced. Even before the time of serfs, our family were Roman slaves who were treated even worse than us. Being a serf is a step up from a slave. I was born on November 25th, 1776, on a very fancy manner to my mother, Teffan Bennet, and my father, Charles Bennet. I have two older brothers. The oldest is named Charles II after my father, and under him is the second oldest, named Peter. They are 2 years apart, and I came 3 years later. Then I have an adorable sister born 5 years after me named Selina. 2 years later, the youngest of the family came along named Mabel. That is my wonderful family. I was very blessed to have them. When I was young, I knew of many people that had no family as young as the age of 6 and had to fend for themselves. I always had a very good connection with my mother, and we spent a good amount of time together. I was a very eager little girl and always wanted to help out. My mother was always very busy, since she had to tend to both the house chores and help father with his chores. I have a very high respect for my mother. I never heard her complain, no matter how hard life got. When I was young, I used to complain all the time about how hard our lives were and how unfair it was. But whenever I did, I would get a lecture from my mother telling me how lucky I was to be a serf, and not a Roman slave like all of our ancestors. I wanted to say, how come I'm not a freeman or a nobleman, because at that time I just did not understand. On top of everything else, she had to take care of 2 little girls. I was oftentimes a second mother to the 2 little ones, especially around harvest time, when neither father or mother were around much, and helped teach them how to properly harvest, plant a field, and help with the preserves. We all had fun together as we worked. I also looked up to my father and brothers. My father was a very strong man that was kind but would not tolerate any dawdling or slacking off, because there was always work to be done. There was absolutely no time for freedom or play, and we had to respect that. If we didn't, the nobleman would get word, and, well, he didn't have time for lazy serfs. My older brothers were very similar. Charles, the oldest, was almost my father's twin, and they had identical personalities. However, Peter was a goof-off and always brought light and laughter into our homes. He somehow always managed to fit in some laughs amongst our non-stop work day. When I was young, I was exactly like Selina and Mabel. I didn't know how serious our lives were until I grew up and began to hear stories of serfs that had been killed because they had not worked hard enough. I didn't want to end up like that, so I put myself to work. My daily chores were hard. I had to work on the Lord's land in order to use some of it for shelter and protection. So we were working extremely hard all the time. 3 out of the 7 days, my family and I had to work on the Lord's land to keep it up. My schedule was normally the same. I'd wake up at 4 in the morning and help my mother prepare breakfast. If we were canning fruit or making preserves, then we would do it at this time. Afterward, I would go out and tend to the animals and watch the 2 little girls until they were old enough to help. Once they were, we would all go out into the fields and either water, plant, or harvest them. We would also do specific things if we got ordered to. For example, grinding the Lord's wheat, cleaning his manor, making weapons, or paying him taxes. We would do this till nightfall and often didn't go to bed till after 10 or 11. We were always exhausted. Working on the Lord's land was much more important than working on our land or around harvest time. We often worked on the Lord's land for 4 to 5 days with hardly any time to tend to our own land. Half of our time was usually spent being demanded around by the Lord. The rest of the time, we worked on our land so we could continue to use it. I knew the land very well growing up. As a serf, I never moved around. I was bound to the land, so when one lord sold it and another bought it, we stayed. I was never allowed out of the estate without the permission of our lord. However, I was never given permission to leave. The closest I ever came to going out of the estate was when I had to go into the Lord's manor to do housework. It was thrilling at first, because everything was so big, but I preferred to do work outside, because you weren't constantly being watched. I remember a particular time on the Christmas of 1783 when I got to serve Christmas dinner to my master's family. I did all this work with the help of my family till the age of 12. Then I was considered an adult and had to work on my own plot of land and provide for myself. At the age of 14 in 790, I found someone suitable to be my husband. His name was Oliver Gregory. It was arranged by my parents. I consider myself lucky. When I was young, I found him very annoying and irresponsible, but he grew up and became very responsible and very suitable. I took on the name of Gregory, but I am known today by the last name Bennet. Life continued to get harder as I got older. I grew stronger, but had much more responsibility on my back. I now had to make dinner and tend a large portion of our field without the help of my family. Me and my husband wanted to have a very big plot of land to raise children on, but that made a lot of work for us. And in 796, we had our first child. It was an adorable baby girl named Agnes, and right away we could tell she'd be very useful. She had gallons of energy, and then some. Over the course of the next 15 years, we had 5 more children, named Marjorie, Gilbert, the twins, Ruiz, and Selah, and the youngest, Walter. They helped us very much to take care of the land, and we loved them dearly. However, it was sad knowing that they would have to suffer the same fate I did, and would have to be serfs the rest of their lives. I hoped that somehow one of them would be able to find a way to be something better, but being anything than what you were born into was unheard of. On March 14th, 792, I had to say goodbye to my wonderful mother. It was a sad day, and we didn't have time for the proper burial we all wished her to have, but we buried her behind the little cottage I grew up in. 2 months later, my father died, and they buried him next to my mother. This was a very sad time for me and my family, but memorable because it was time I got to spend with my brothers and sisters. We did not see each other often anymore because we all worked on different plots of land, and I believe that was one of the last times we all got to be together. We got very lucky that we were able to have our parents for as long as we did. Most serfs died much sooner, and we all felt very blessed. To this day, I continue to work on that same plot of land I grew up in and watch my kids grow up on. I still have never been outside the manor and hope to one day before I die. But until then, I will continue to work hard and serve my master, striving to be like my mother and never complain. I must get back to work now, but before I do, does anyone have any questions for me?